Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. You are welcome. Give me a minute. As usual, from this page, I need to shoot it out. So I am going to shoot this out and invite people from my other platforms to come join. And I was wondering why I looked like a cat, because I had taken a hairband off. And so I am going to take 1 minute and band my hair. And then I'll take another minute to share the videos. I am incredibly annoying, but you will have to manage me like that. That's all you get. This is it. There you go. Hello, hi, it's good to see you. Right, let's see if I can put this video out to platforms and if we can invite 1 or 2 people to join us. And when that is in place, we can have this very important discussion for me. This discussion is on Transformations Inc. I could have put it on my education place, but I put it on transformation because it's about change. It's about changing your interactions. It's about changing communication skills. It's about making compensations when things have not gone the way we want things to go. And that is in response to somebody's query today. Somebody asked me about it this very day. It is in answering that question, I'll be sharing my personal experiences as I've raised 2 people. Positive experiences and not so positive experiences, they all do happen. Doesn't make you any less than you really were, but I want you to understand why certain things happen. So this lady has got an 11-year-old impossible kid to live with. She is tempted to let the social system take this kid because it's too much for her to handle. She doesn't understand why a kid who was apparently very nice a few months ago is suddenly this little monster she's got to live with. And the understanding is very simple. If you understand how children develop, it might make this manageable for you. It doesn't make it pleasant, but manageable at least. So that's what I am going to be discussing today. Change management, changing of the guard. Shukran. Okay, so which one is this? Right, please come. Hi. It's not in order. Kofi? Okay. It was not in order, but I think I've managed to find it. It was not in order, but I've managed to get it in order now. I think so. Because maybe use the 002331, yeah? I was changing it to this one, but I think that number might be better. No? Okay, check. Let me finish this. That's the thing, I don't know. So let me finish this broadcast and then I'll decide and we'll go. Good evening, everybody. You know I'm random. I still am random. Nothing has changed. Okay, I think I was waiting for one platform to activate and they clearly have activated, so let's roll. I managed to find an article. I like to use reference materials every time I talk about this. This is from a website called parent24.com, parent24.com. If you know any groups where there are parents, people with young children, children going into upper primary, early in secondary school, please share this video for them because this is targeted for them. Why is my preteen being so difficult is the title of this particular article. And it's from parent24.com. Precious, hi. Adjoa, hi, sis. It says your preteen's life has just become a roller coaster ride, and yours too. Unfortunately, yours is a greater ride. Just yesterday, your primary school kid was obedient, easy to communicate with, and a pleasure to live with. Now suddenly they are moody, bad-tempered, typical teenage behavior, and you thought that lay in the future. It's a bit shocking for most of us when our kids come to that point, because we all know about teenage. We know how difficult teenage can be. You know how unpredictable they can be. When a kid is a teenager and they do random things, I think most of us can sort of manage it and handle it because it's understandable. But when you're 10-year-old, you're 11-year-old, you're 12-year-old, one who is not even a teenager yet, suddenly becomes those things, it can be confusing. But it says in this article that the truth is that kids aged 10 to 12 are difficult as teens. And this person who says this is a family therapist. She says it's no wonder. It's not easy having one foot in your childhood and the other one in your teens. So it's a very confusing period of time for these kids. Their bodies are developing, so they look like sensible people, like the two I live with. But their reasoning capacity is so woefully inadequate in comparison to how physically they present. It's a bit confusing. It's confusing for the kids and it's confusing for you, the adults as well, because you see them your size and you begin to expect them to reason logically like you, and it's so disappointing because they can't. They are kids. They are kids in adult bodies. Very confusing for everybody. But it's important that you understand that they are babies in adult skin. And it's very confusing because you don't know to treat them as babies because they don't like being treated as babies, but they cannot be treated as adults because they do not have the reasoning capacity yet. They still do need a bit of scaffold, and that's where the changing of the guard comes in. It is a period where you have controlled everything in their life when they were really young, and you need to pass some of that back to them, but you've got to empower them before that changing of the guard happens. So it says that preteens and early teens are subjected to more stress than we realize. So at that point, I'm like, they don't parent, they don't buy food, they don't have children. What exactly could stress them? Their bodies are starting to change and the amount of homework they have to do is increasing. They are still struggling to find a position in society. I'm like, they are still kids. That's their position. But interestingly, they might disagree. It says again, this is the second time it's repeating, their bodies are developing faster than their emotional maturity, and it can be hard for them to emotionally process the physical changes. So I shared a video earlier on of me giggling with my son this afternoon. He wanted to sit in my lap and he no longer fits. It's ridiculous. He doesn't fit in my lap. Give it another year and I will be sitting in his lap. We are actually changing places physically. And so you watch this young man transition into this big looking man, but then his mental faculties have not caught up with what has happened to him physically. No, he is not going to reason like a man. And he does not. No, he's not going to have the fortitude an adult will have. Waitaka, hi, good evening. I think that's a greeting, and I greet you right back. How are you? I hope you are well. It's good to see you. We are discussing the changing of the guard, why some children at certain ages are difficult to deal with, why some kids who were very, very obedient suddenly become challenging, and the responses which might be appropriate or otherwise, depending on the age of the kid. It says another factor that these kids struggle with is the fact that they are trying to become independent. It results in them talking back at you, challenging you. One way teens try to establish their independence is to want to spend more time with their friends than with family. The problem, however, is that not all kids in your kids' peer group will be developing at the same pace. One might still be a child and prefer to play outside, whilst his classmates are already eyeing girls. That's funny. And if your child develops more slowly, their peer group might consider them not cool and bully them. There is a lot of issues with bullying at this stage that we need to be aware of. She talks about many things, and there are many, many websites that you can go to. It explains a lot of things. Should girls and boys be treated differently? Definitely want to look at. I will put this article on my Facebook page. I will put it, in fact, on this particular page because we are all here. I'm going to put this right here on the transformations page. Transformations is a good place to be for these kind of things. I am still trying to find the right place to take you so I don't post things at the wrong place. There we go. Hi. I am still discussing difficulties when changing the guard, and the fact that your communication frailties in the early days come back to bite, and they really do come back to bite. It is a painful truth, but it's a painful truth we cannot run away from. We've got to address these. If you are somebody who was an autocratic person, then when you get to this age, the transition is more difficult than typical. Somebody who was domineering, somebody who was a bit of a dictator, somebody who commands, struggles more than those who learn to negotiate. Don't get me wrong. I am not talking about walkovers. I'm talking about negotiators. I am talking about people who communicate. That is a two-way street. Allowing somebody to find the folly of his ways sometimes, or listening to somebody's argument and then picking holes through those arguments sometimes, but you've got to be prepared to receive that argument at some point. If you block them out completely, as nonsensical as you know that what they're about to say will be, sometimes you just have to listen to the nonsense. Allow the nonsense to be presented, and then you logically unpick the nonsense. If you are one who learned how to have a conversation with the kids, at that stage, you do have a chance. If you are one who never spoke to them, if you are one who never got to bond with them, if you are one who had a very distant relationship with the kids, then in this transition, it is going to be very, very hard, because you do need to be up close and personal. You need to be up close and personal. You will need to observe like a hawk. You need to take things on, even when they are unpalatable. You need to challenge things, because you are forming character at this point. You cannot ignore anything, because anything you ignore receives the okay signal, and it might not be cool. It just might not be cool. When you spot something which is an issue, you've got to confront it head on. And confrontation is not pleasant, but it's usually very necessary, depending on what the issue was, especially in this age group. So then she asked me, she says, so how do I speak to my kids? And it's one of the things that is so profound and it's so ridiculous when somebody asks you, how do you talk to your kid? Well, to me, you sit down and you say something, and you invite somebody to say something. You ask a question or you share information and you invite a response. She's like, so what if they don't respond? I'm like, you might want to prompt sometimes. You might want to open up honestly yourself. You might want to tell them how things make you feel. The thought process behind the anger you currently feel. The annoyance you feel and the reason why you feel it. The fact that you want to knock their heads off and the reasons why you want to knock their heads off instantaneously. Sometimes you will have to just get it across how frustrating it is from your end. Because remember, these little people might not have the logical capacity to reason the way you expect them to. When you see them physically, you expect an adult's output, and they might not necessarily be ready, mentally ready, to give you an adult's output. Before we go any further, I would like to get a slight indication of who is on at the moment. How many of you are parents? And how many of you are parenting children in this age group? If you could just give me a very quick indication, it will help me to tailor things better. How to communicate with your team. I am doing this ridiculous search. Hello, Pedro. Hi. I am doing this ridiculous search because I actually do want you to listen to what people say. Some of them may sound very ridiculous in the first instance, but when you take time to look at it, so this is from childmind.org, tips for communicating with your team. There's actually an article about it. No, it is an age-established problem. No, it's not just your kid who is naughty. Your kid might not even be naughty at all. Your kid is going through a phase. So this article opens with the teenage years have a lot in common with the terrible twos. Remember that. You've already done the terrible twos. Your teenage years and your preteen years are very similar to those terrible twos. During both stages, I'm not signing anything up, just close. During both stages, our kids are doing exciting new things, but they are also pushing boundaries and throwing tantrums. The major developmental task facing both age groups is also the same. Kids must pull away from parents and begin to assert their own independence. No wonder they sometimes act as if they think they are the center of the universe, because that's all they see. It makes for complicated parenting, especially because teens are beginning to make decisions about things that have real consequences, like school and friends and driving, not to speak of substance use. But they aren't good at regulating their emotions yet. That's the key thing. So teens are prone to taking risks and making impulsive decisions without considering all possible outcomes. This is a very typical behavior of theirs. Something seems like a good idea, they are off to go and do it. They do not pause for 3 seconds to consider the way you expect them to. And it can be very disappointing when it happens. Really gut-wrenching when it happens. But then you have to remember that these are people who look like they are sensible, but they haven't quite got to being sensible yet. They are still children in an adult body. It helps me a lot in my classroom practice when you see difficult behavior, because they look like adults. I teach high school, so my grade 11s and grade 12s, they are big looking people, but they are just as daft as my grade 7s and my grade 5s. And when things happen which expose that, it shocks me every now and again, but I have to remind myself that these are babies in adult skin. And if I'm able to remember that they are babies in adult skin, my reaction and my responses are regulated accordingly. If this sounds familiar, take a deep breath. So let me read this scenario. It says, it means that having a healthy and trusting parent-child relationship during the teenage years is more important than ever. Staying close isn't easy though. Teens often aren't very gracious when they are rejecting what they perceive to be parental interference. While they are an open book to their friends who they talk to constantly via text and social media, they might become mute when asked by mom how their day went. A request that seemed reasonable to dad may be perceived as a grievous outrage. It appears moms get a worse end of the stick. If this sounds familiar, take a deep breath and remind yourself that your child is going through his terrible teens. It is a phase that will pass, and your job as parent is still vitally important. Only the role may have changed slightly. Here are some tips for navigating. So tip number 1, it's ridiculous. The tip number 1 says, listen. Shh, and listen. If you are curious about what's going on in your teen's life, ask direct questions. Asking direct questions might not be as effective as simply sitting back and listening. Kids are more likely to be open with their parents if they don't feel pressure to share information. Remember, even an offhand comment about something that happened during the day is her way of reaching out. And you are likely to hear more if you stay open and interested, but not prying. Difficult thing to achieve. Tip number 2 is validating their feelings. So it says it's often a tendency to try to solve problems for our kids, but you can't fix it all. And it's very difficult. Or downplay their disappointment and tell them it's okay. Sometimes it's not okay. But saying something like she wasn't right for you anyway after a romantic disappointment can feel dismissive. Instead, show kids that you understand and empathize by reflecting the comment back. Wow, that does sound difficult, doesn't it? 3, tip number 3 says show trust, and that is very difficult to do. I've got to openly admit. Because these people are not trustworthy, by the way, at this age. They can't trust themselves and you can't trust them because they are unpredictable. Absolutely unpredictable. They make stupid decisions and you claw things back, but you've got to give them a little bit of leverage and give them opportunities to earn trust back. And then they will break it again and you give them another chance to earn it right back. It's a catch-22. We all have to stay in for a while until the kids understand morality and what is right and what is wrong. They still don't quite get it 100% yet. Point 4 says don't be a dictator. And it's a very difficult thing to achieve in the teenage years, because in the younger years, you have to be a dictator. The kid doesn't know what they're doing. You make all the decisions for them. You decide when they should breathe, when they should wash, when they should eat. If they were responsible people, you could pass it back on to them very easily, but they are not responsible yet. But you cannot be a dictator. You still get to set the rules, but be ready to explain them. And this is the key thing. You set the rules for sure. Don't run away from setting rules. You have to set the rules. The only difficulty here, the only difference here is that you will be prepared to explain the logic behind it so they understand. While pushing the boundaries is natural for teenagers, hearing your thoughtful explanation about why parties on school nights are not allowed will make the rules seem more reasonable. You have to find a way of reasoning with them. And when you do find that way of reasoning with them, can you give me a ring, please? Because I want to know. My kids don't speak the same language I speak anymore. They speak Greek. The language they speak is not recognizable to me. No. When you find a way of getting your teenagers to be reasonable, call me. I live with 2 of them. I do need to find a way to get them to be reasonable. So please teach me when you get there. I am still a work in progress. We are definitely not there. Point 5 says give praise. Parents tend to praise children more when they are younger, but adolescents need the self-esteem boost just as much. And this was one which is a good reminder for me. Teenagers might act like they are too cool to care about what their parents think, but the truth is they still want your approval. They do. They still do want your approval. Also, looking for opportunities to be positive and encouraging is good for the relationship, especially when it is feeling strained. Mercy. Hello, sis. Good evening. Can we talk on the side when we finish this? Control your emotions. God Almighty. It's a test of everything you hold sacred. You will be pushed to points where you want to kill people. Oh, man, favor, hi. You will be pushed to positions where you need to murder somebody instantly. But you have to learn to control your emotions, especially if you are somebody like me with a very sharp tongue. Sometimes you just need to stay somewhere, cool down before you speak, because you know it's going to be lethal if you unleash in anger. You have to learn to control your emotions. It says it's easy for your temper to flare when your teen is being rude, but don't respond in kind, because you are validating the feeling, the behavior. Remember that you are the adult and he or she is less able to control his emotions or think logically when he or she is upset. Count to 10 or take some deep breaths before responding. And if you are both too upset to talk, hit pause until you've had a chance to calm down. Very important. Very important indeed. Point number 7, do things together. Talking isn't the only way to communicate. And actually, if you have a teenager, talking to you might not be forthcoming. It's great if you can spend some time doing things you both enjoy, whether it is cooking, hiking, or going to the movies, without talking about anything personal. It's important for kids to know that they can be in proximity to you and share positive experiences without having to worry that you will pop intrusive questions or call them on the carpet for something. Ajubi, hi, sis. 8, share regular meals. I think that one does not even require discussion. Share regular meals. Some people choose to do it eating from one plate. Some people choose to do it eating from one table. Other people choose to do it eating in the same room. But share some regular meals. It's a nice time to have a conversation. Dinner conversations give every member of the family a chance to check in and talk casually about sports or TV or politics. Kids who feel comfortable talking to parents about everyday things are likely to be more open when harder things come up too. One rule, no phones allowed during dinner. Be observant. I cannot emphasize that enough. Those kids at that age are tricky customers, all right? They are very tricky customers. You will have to know when they are missing for 3 seconds. You need to be aware of it. You have to spot when they haven't spoken for 30 seconds because they probably are up to no good on a phone somewhere. When they've been in their room a bit longer than they should do, you should be touching base with them, challenging them to come closer to you, because you do need to know what's going on. You need to be as vigilant as a hawk. There's a lot of things going on, some good, others not so good. And for that reason, you will have to learn to spot patterns which require spotting. I am going to put this right back out again on that page. I think I remembered to put the other one. I hope I did not forget. If it happens that I forgot, remind me after the broadcast and I will share the articles for you. But it's a very simple case of putting out articles which are published. I am not suggesting that it's mine in any way, so Facebook, don't give me any grief. Surely we can share links to publications at the moment, citing and giving credit. There we go. I put it on Amamansin instead of transformations. There we go. When you have so many pages, it's difficult sometimes to remember which one is for what. But it will be good in the end because it will help to segregate things. It will make it easier for you guys to find things when you need to find a video in retrospect. Everything on the one page thing did not work well for anybody involved. There we go. Mindsets. I'm just putting it in my groups. Let's go. Okay. I asked a question earlier. Can I just get another indication of where you are in terms of parenting? Which kids are you parenting at the moment? Are you a parent? Are you a preteen parent? Are you a teen parent? Or do you have younger kids? Are you looking to prepare for kids? I want to get an idea of who is on at the moment so I can target the message to fit you even more snugly. Good evening, Kwejo. Hi everybody. It's good to have you. Thank you for joining. Please share the video for me. Tell people that I am right here talking about it. I've put it in a couple of groups. But if you know any other groups that I should have put in that I forgot, please put it in those groups for me. Tell people that I am discussing parenting, the difficult topic that is parenting. The topic which requires a whole textbook but often doesn't come with one. It helps when you understand certain things not to be localized behavior with just your kids, and you understand that it's an age-specific behavior. It helps. It helps when you understand what is about to happen so you can prepare. Yes, Rich, it's been a long time. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining. Really good to see you. Right, I think that I have shared it to all the groups that I possibly can share to. Yeah, I can't do it anymore, and I will be in trouble. Some of these groups are difficult to crack because you don't know what they do allow and what they don't allow. And the next minute, you know, Facebook is complaining that you've put something they don't. You are a parent with 3 children. Ajubi, how old are the kids? Do you have any of these little demons to live with? They are not little demons, in fact, they are lovely kids. They are challenging, but they are exciting. They are not boring. That word does not happen in your life when you have teens and preteens. You have to be very vigilant, but in also being vigilant allows you to bond with them in a different way, a more meaningful way, the way I found it. They were lovely when they were younger. As challenging and as difficult as they can be, I think that what you get out of them in this age is actually more meaningful. It is wonderful when they do things right because you know it is very rare for things to be done right at this age. So when you see good things, you celebrate it. You do. You have to remember to celebrate them. When is my parenting approach no longer working? Has anybody hit those crossroads before? For most people, it's typically around age 9. Mami Amesika, hi. Are you a parent? Which children are you parenting? What age group are you in? Are you one of the lucky ones raising little babies? Or are you one of the unfortunate ones like me who's accidentally ended up with 2 teenage kids that you don't know what to do with? I want to sell them, but nobody's interested in buying them. Do you also find yourself at that stage? Have you found any tips, any support which helps you to cope and manage with them? And if you do, it would be lovely if you could share. I am working through a couple of articles. The point of those articles is to draw our attention to what information other people have put in their communities to support parents who are lost raising teenagers. So there is a website called empoweringparents.com, and the person who runs it, I think Debbie, is a therapist. So she says, as a therapist, she knows firsthand that the more you push your kids, the more they get defensive and dig in their heels. Very interesting concept. But she has 5 tips. Start with understanding even when you don't understand. It's a simple secret that will help you in everything you do with your teen. No matter how hard it might be, try to start all interactions with your child with understanding, even if you don't fully understand or quite comprehend what they're talking about. So she gives an example, because when you first read this, it's mind-boggling. You find your child online chatting with her friends when she's supposed to be doing her schoolwork. It drives you crazy. Well, I want to kill her. I probably do kill her sometimes. She's barely getting by in school and doesn't seem to care or understand that she needs to do her homework. Your teen, on the other hand, is thinking, I have to get online and talk with Skylar. If I don't make up after the fight we had in the hall today, all the other girls will be against me. You and your child are living 2 different realities. Ask your child honestly why she's chatting. Try to be understanding of her reality, and then you kill her. Even if you don't completely get it. Once you know what is going on, try saying. And you can manage this and you can adapt this whichever way you want. But it says that be open to listen to the other side of the argument and see. Don't get emotional or take it personally. That's a tough one, because it is emotional and it is very personal. Some of the incidents can be quite serious. It can be quite devastating sometimes, in fact. And so staying calm requires that you are consciously aware of the need to be calm, the need not to get emotional, and the need not to take it personally if you can. Ask honest questions, but not loaded questions. Remember, they are not capable of processing the depth that you can. Ask your teens for ideas and be collaborative. Let him see that you believe in him and that you are not mad at him for struggling in his life. When you let him see that you have faith in his abilities and he has the space to work things out on his own, you will begin to develop true confidence in him. But it says don't ask loaded questions, because they make them defensive. What's wrong with you? It's a very popular question. Honest answer is I haven't got the foggiest. Do you have any ideas for how you might get up on time? What happens when he has no ideas? Because he genuinely has no ideas. Don't need your child's good behavior. Don't feel or show as if you need your teen's cooperation, validation, or good behavior, because you don't. You are the parent and they are the kid. As soon as you need something from your child so that you can feel better, you have put yourself in a very vulnerable position, because he does not give it to you. It's more fun to deny what you need. It should not be necessary for you to need it. Let your child know you won't talk with him until he can approach you with civility. And it's very important. They should not dare shout at you regardless. Being rude and being difficult purposefully should not be entertained, even when you're trying all these tips. You should not need their good behavior. They need to behave well. It is more important for them that they are on your good side than the other way around. And I think a lot of us forget that. We do. Don't do anything until you are both calm. That's an interesting one. Very interesting. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Yes, a lot of us will have to learn breathing techniques. Because again, depending on the situation, this is easier to say than to do. It says another rule of thumb is to avoid doing anything until you and your child have both calmed down. Oh, God Almighty. The fact is, you don't want to respond to your child when you are upset. You can say anything at that point. And depending on who you are and the personality you have, you could actually inflict permanent wounds in your need to lash. And if you were actually dealing with an adult at that point, they might be able to cope. But this is a teenager with a very fragile self-esteem, typically. So lashing out can be received in a very terrible way. How to communicate with and listen to your teen. Healthychildren.org also has an article. But in this article, what I like is that it starts with 3 points. It says many parents have questions that start with, what do I say when? However, parents need to understand that it is less important what you say. It's more important that you listen. So it says step 1, turn off the parent alarm. Listen without judgment if you can, and without reaction if possible. When your son says, Mom, I met this girl, and you react by saying you are too young to date. That instinctively, the instinctual alarm prevented you from being able to hold a meaningful discussion on healthy sexuality and responsibility. That will be a very interesting day when it happens, because I probably will stew that little girl. And that boy too, because I know you can hear me. It says, don't catastrophize. That's interesting. It's not a catastrophe. Many things can be handled. In the now and in the moment, it is terrible. When teens come to their parents with concerns, you need to be the calming effect. You need to be the rational presence. That will create a safe space for them to figure things out. When parents make it seem worse than they had imagined, they leave more anxious and won't return. Very important. But don't over-empathize. Don't over-empathize. Adolescents need a sounding board. Sometimes they exaggerate. Sometimes they express fleeting feelings. When you over-empathize, it can heighten their emotions and make you look naive or overly involved when they come to their senses later. Imagine you're empathizing by condemning their friend who your daughter had a fight with. You will look wrong the next day when your daughter is best friends with the girl again, the one she hated yesterday. So don't be caught in that mistake of over-empathizing. Be honest. Be honest as much as you can. It is wonderful how much information there is available for parents who do want it. The amount of websites you can be to and find very sensible suggestions. 9 tips for communicating with your teenage son. Now this one had me giggling. Point 1, it says give him advance notice. Tell him ahead of time about the timing and topic you want to discuss with him. While you shouldn't expect him to show up for the conversation with a checklist of counterpoints, this will give him the necessary time to pre-process the impending conversation and gather any thoughts that he might have. It gives him the opportunity to be more sensible than he would be off his cuff. It allows him to collect himself. It allows him to look good in front of you. And it's a real big morale booster. Feed him. It's the second point. Feed him. Be prepared that there will be nothing in your fridge most days because he is a hoover for food. Make sure he has something to eat before you start talking. We've all experienced or observed correlation between hunger and irritability. Although your son might not be grouchy just yet, make sure that his blood sugar levels are stable and keep him focused and engaged throughout your conversation. Ditch the lecture. Ditch the lecture does not require explanation. Control your emotions is your fourth one. Does not require explanation. Walk while you talk. Boys are generally spatial processors. This was interesting for me, in fact. And therefore, they think best when they are active and moving. Sister Viv, hi. Boys, so this one is for teenage boys particularly. Boys are generally spatial processors and therefore think best when they are active and moving. Forcing your son to sit down and sit while you berate him with a long lecture is a recipe for disaster, or at least distraction. Try taking your talk outside, walking around the block, shooting hoops, or playing catch while you discuss the issue at hand. This will keep your son alert and engaged. It was an interesting one. Communicate indirectly. Creating a comfortable environment for an important conversation includes the simple nuances of body language and eye contact. Many kids, and especially teenage boys, will be more open to talk with less eye contact. Staring down into your son's eyes while having an important conversation might be interpreted as aggressive or unnerving, and your son might shut down as a result. Walking side by side or driving in a car will naturally lessen the amount of direct eye contact. Use physical examples. If you need to address your son's perpetually messy room, in my house, it's the daughter's perpetually messy room. Don't just talk about the fact that he never puts his clothes in the hamper. Walk around the room and use physical examples. Have him pick up items strewn across and determine if they are clean or dirty. Providing physical and ideally tangible examples will help your child process and remember your conversation. Well, I'm still waiting for the day when my daughter remembers and processes that conversation, but we're still working. Be aware of your son's innate competitiveness. Doesn't always just have to be a son. If I happen to be your daughter, this was just as true for me. In many situations, it's important to confirm that you are on his side and that you trust him even when you don't trust him. He may become more open to feedback and coaching if he feels like you are on the same team. In other situations, you might want to tap into his competitive side if you feel he will respond well to challenge that you've presented. And finally, allow time for follow-up. I thought that was a good article. Really liked that one because I picked a few tips from there and I'm like, oh, okay. 5 strategies for effectively communicating with your teen. There are so many. I will not be able to go through all of them. I just want this to be the conversation starter. But this one is what I want to end with. Good evening, sis. Because this one actually does give practical things. It says, 1, start with a clean slate. I don't know of any parent who hasn't engaged in accidental parenting. Going down a road they had no intention of going down, only to find themselves stuck in dynamic that's not working. Beating yourself up for choices you've already made is a waste of energy. There's no point going back. So instead, give yourself permission to wipe the slate clean and commit to making a conscious shift going forward. You will make mistakes, plenty of them. You will have to learn to forgive yourself very quickly. You will have to learn to realize that to err is human. And for fresh starts, each one of us deserves regularly. The second one says drop the expectations. And in fact, when I first read it, I was just like, no, we need high standards. But it's not about having standards or not. It says the thing that hurts or disappoints us most is when other people don't meet your expectations by how they behave. So you've got to make sure that what you are expecting of a teenager is actually possible for a teenager. That you are not expecting your teenage son to be a man yet, your teenage daughter to be a woman yet. They are babies trapped in a man and woman's body, but don't necessarily have the brain and emotional function to operate at that output. Hello, Clement. Hi. Respectful listening was point 3. Staying calm is point 4. And share your stories is point 5. And that for me was the most powerful advice. Hi, Clement. You will have to explain to the kids the reason why certain things trigger you. The reason why certain things have you up the wall, so certain things just make you so apprehensive and angry, is because those things remind you of your own failures. Or those things remind you of situations where issues have brewed because of an incident. And you've got to share those stories with the children so they understand why it makes you angry. Why leaving the house without permission makes you furious, because their security might be in doubt. That you worry about their safety And you might want to share stories where people have not taken that seriously and where that has ended. You might want to bring stories. If you do have personal stories, they are the most powerful stories to share. Ketri, hi. When I was a teenager, I made this very choice, and this is exactly what happened. Is the reason why I will not allow you to do the same thing, because I know exactly where that will end you. Repeating my mistake is the epitome of foolishness. And when you explain it to a kid, when you share your stories with a child, when you allow them to see where you are coming from, difficulties you have overcome, also make it reasonable that they might also overcome their own difficulties. If my mom has conquered, maybe I just might too. If my mom had the capacity to do this, just maybe I might be able to do so too. Share your frustrations with them openly. Share your mistakes with them openly, because we are not perfect. I mean, hi. If we're, how old are your kids? Do you have any of these teenagers? Goodness. The fact that I'm actually saying that I live with two of them is scary in itself, but I do. The unpredictables. I have two of them in my house at the same time. Two tricky customers that I have to somehow navigate a changing of the guard with. So always my physical presence was enough to dominate situations for me. Well, suddenly I am the shortest in my house. Physical dominance is not possible anymore because I am not dominant anymore. Screaming and shouting, powerful at some point, no longer powerful. You will have to find a way of emotionally connecting, explaining. So logic prevails is what you will have to change to. They are more likely to be able to pick you up very soon. I had my son, go watch that video, it was ridiculous. I had my son in my lap this afternoon. And this is a position we've done many, many times since I have had him. The big one is 11, you are lucky. Oh, you can see the signs. Mommy, don't fool yourself. He's a preteen. He's already on the way. The struggles have already begun. No, it doesn't happen when they're 13. It actually starts for most kids when they are 10. When they are 10. Coach, I see you. Felicia, you are welcome. Thank you for joining. We are going through difficult conversations, and one of the difficult conversations I wanted to have is how to raise your teenage kids, how to change guard with your teenage kids. When you first start, you are their teacher. You teach them everything. They don't know anything. And when you get to this stage, you are already distancing yourself and you are becoming a facilitator. A facilitator doesn't live for them. A facilitator doesn't decide for them. A facilitator makes things happen and you lead them. You scaffold them towards what is right and where you should get them. Sometimes you have to lead them kicking and screaming. It would have been easier to pick them up and take them there, but they are way too big for you already. Physical size has already shifted. And mine are still early teens. They've not even hit proper mid-teens. They are still early teens, but physically bigger than I am. So wagging of the finger no longer works. It looks ridiculous. Trying to slap him will require a ladder very soon. Not possible. You will have to learn to reach your giant from the bottom at this stage. Very difficult thing to do. Very difficult thing to do, but we all have to learn because that's the reality. There are some people who are in their 50s and still go back to mom to consult, to ask, because that relationship was built ages ago. And there are some people who are 18 but will still not remember the word mom. And it comes with this understanding of how to interact with them. So we're joking today with me having to sit in his lap in another year or two, but that's the reality. That's where we're going. He can pick me up. Of course he can pick me up. I can't pick him up comfortably anymore. I am not that strong anymore. So I need to find other skills apart from strength. I need to find other skills apart from my sharp tongue. I need to find ways of reaching this kid with logic and reasoning. Dictatorship no longer works. It's lost its power. It has. It has lost its power. Do you know that? And those of you who come to know this before your kids are teenagers are the lucky ones. A lot of people actually end up in this stage, make mistakes before we understand that there is a phase change and we should have changed a lot of our thinking before we got here. Do you understand the compensations you've got to make? Do you know what you've got to change? Do you understand what you need to do? And if you don't, do you know where you can seek support? I mean, for the preteens are harder than the teenage years. Believe me, we've just come out of it. When they are actually proper teenagers, you understand why they are behaving the way they are, because they are bona fide teenagers. That's not difficult. But you look at these preteens, they are not even proper teenagers yet. But they're giving you aggro. Well, they do give you aggro because the process has already started. We need to model good behavior. We do. Do as I say and not as I do no longer works at this stage. They do as you do. They really do as you do. You will not be able to monitor everything they do. So your teaching of morality is going to be critical at this point. If you can teach them what is right and what is wrong and connect with the kids deeply enough so that they genuinely know what is right, then their choices are likely to be more responsible even when you are not looking, because you cannot look all the time. You cannot look all the time. You will have lapses because you are human. Hi, Mercy. Hi. Right, Mercy. Yeah, you are doing teenage. You are clearly doing teenage. And I think you have a mixture of preteens and not so teens also. And that gives you a very interesting dynamic in your house. You will have to be the attorney general in your house. You will have to settle some scores in your house because the kids are in such different phases, going through so many different things. Wanting mom, not wanting mom, doesn't even want to hear the word mom anymore, and then hugging mom every minute of the day is what we normally experience. I wanted to talk about the changing of the guard. I wanted to make you aware that you are going to change positions very soon. That the dominant factor in the kid's brain is no longer going to be you. You are going to be an advisor. You have to learn to be a powerful advisor. You have to be an advisor who becomes the default source of information. Not because you say so, but because your kid knows so. Do you know how to communicate that fact? That's what we'll be working on. This is just the beginning of a series. I hoped that people who are on, we need to show them respect and empathize with them and admonish sometimes when we need to. You sometimes forget that we were once teenagers and we were tearaways. We were tearaways, we really were. I don't know how many angelic teenagers are on board, but I clearly wasn't one of them. I wasn't the most difficult, but I was not an angel either. Not at all. My mom, the clever manipulator, that was my mom. She found ways in which to manipulate me. Not necessarily, was never aggressive, never in your face, always sitting by her one corner and minding her own business, but the look on her face was enough to blackmail you to do what she wanted. Anyway, that's where we want to get to. Where you reason with the kids and you teach the kids that the look from you is enough. The thought of you is enough. How disappointed you might be. Or not staying late because they know you will wait. They don't want you to stay up late. When you find that, you have won this battle. Hopefully, this discussion has been a good thought provoker, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to provoke thoughts. I wanted to force this onto the table for discussion, because we don't force it to the table for discussion often enough, in my view. We could do much better. We could teach each other. Those of you who've done it before me, I count on you to share your experiences so I do not repeat your mistakes. And when it's time, I will pass the buck to those who follow so they do not repeat our mistakes. Oh, Mercy says, thank you, sis, for your motivation. Thank you. People like us are really grateful for what you are doing in our lives. And people like me are so grateful for the support you give me. It's phenomenal. I don't take it for granted. I am so grateful for the support you show me, and every single one of you who is on. Viv, I see you. Sister Sylvia, I see you. Ajwa, I see you. Yusuf, I see you. These are the names I see on my screen. There are a few more behind. Do bear with me if I can't see your name, but I value your presence, and I do pray that what we do here helps us to improve our living experiences with the kids. It helps us to avert impeding disasters, ones that we can avoid, and it helps us to manage the things that we can't change better because we are emotionally prepared. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for sharing. And if you've not shared it, can you please hit the share button before we go? Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions. If there are any questions, I would love to answer them. Again, I'll wait for another 30 seconds or a minute just to see if we have any questions. If there are no questions, then I would thank you so much for watching. I am very grateful that you do come. I pray that your experiences with your kids become enriched because of some of these things you do see being discussed. And even if it's too late for you and your kids, you pass it on to other people who find it useful. My pleasure, Mami Fua. My pleasure. My pleasure. Sure, Mercy. As soon as I sign out, I would WhatsApp you. So it doesn't sound like we have any questions. So thank you and catch you soon. I'll be back on live today on the I Need Science page. That is talking hardcore education. We will talk about science and math education on there in another 30 minutes or so. Speak soon. Pleasure, Sister Sylvia. Thank you.